This is the story of Claus Von Bulow and a shocking reversal of fortune that, honestly, still has people talking decades later. So here's the big mystery that makes this case so fascinating. Get this. A man is convicted of trying to murder his wife. He gets a 30-year prison sentence, and then, just a few years later, he walks out a free man, totally acquitted of everything. How on earth does that happen? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into.
Okay, so first things first, you gotta meet the couple at the heart of all this. On one side, you've got Claus Von Bulow. He's a suave, Cambridge-educated guy who used to work for the billionaire J. Paul Getty. And on the other, there's Martha, but everyone called her Sonny. She was a famous American heiress, had even been married to a prince before. They were living the high life, a life of just incredible luxury. But here's the key detail you have to remember. Sonny suffered from hypoglycemia, that's low blood sugar. And that one little fact, it's going to become the absolute cornerstone of this entire saga.
In December of 1979, Sonny falls into a coma. But, amazingly, she recovers. Then, almost exactly 1 year to the day later, it happens again. Only this time, she doesn't wake up. Sonny Von Bulow would end up spending the next 28 years in a permanent vegetative state. And, as you can imagine, the circumstances around that second coma kicked off a massive criminal investigation.
The investigation pretty quickly zeroed in on her husband, Claus. And at that first trial, the prosecutors laid out what really looked like an open and shut case, and it led to a guilty verdict, fast.
So, the prosecution's case was built on 3 really solid pillars. First up, motive. Claus told to inherit a cool $14 million from Sonny, plus he was having an affair with a soap opera actress. Ouch. Second, testimony. You had both the family maid and his mistress giving these incredibly damaging stories about him. And third, the smoking gun, or, in this case, the weapon. A black bag found in his closet with a syringe that had insulin on it.
And the testimony from his mistress, Alexandra Isles? Wow, it was like something straight out of a movie. She told the court that Claus confessed he just stood there and watched Sonny fade away, only calling a doctor at the very last second. I mean, can you imagine how that sounded to a jury? It painted this chilling picture of a cold, calculating husband just watching his wife die.
So you've got the motive, you've got the testimony, you've got the physical evidence. I mean, it seemed like a slam dunk, right? And it was. In 1982, the jury came back guilty on 2 counts of attempted murder. Claus Von Bulow was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Now, for most people, that's where the story ends. But for Claus, it was really just getting started.
Staring down 3 decades in prison, Von Bulow does something that very few people can. He hires a legal dream team, led by the soon-to-be famous Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz. And they cook up a new strategy that was, well, both brilliant and super controversial.
See, Dershowitz's team didn't waste time arguing about the insulin itself. Nope. Instead, they attacked how that needle was found. And this is a huge point. This search wasn't done by the police with a warrant. Sonny's kids from her first marriage hired a private eye. Then they lied to a locksmith to get into Claus's private closet when he wasn't even home. And that's where they claimed they found that critical black bag.
The defense basically said, hold on a second. This whole search stinks. They pointed out all these conflicting stories from the family about how they got into the closet. By just poking holes and creating doubt about how the evidence was collected, they managed to convince the Rhode Island Supreme Court that the conviction wasn't safe. The verdict was overturned. Claus Von Bulow was going to get a brand new trial.
All right, so now we're at the second trial in 1985, and this time the defense comes out swinging with a completely new and aggressive game plan. They weren't just questioning the search anymore. They were about to tear down the prosecution's entire medical case.
So this second trial really boiled down to 2 totally different stories. The prosecution's case was simple. Claus injected Sonny with insulin. But the defense, they came back with a whole other explanation. They argued that her comas were actually self-induced, a tragic mix of alcohol, a bunch of drugs she ingested, and her own chronic health issues. And to back up this new theory, the defense didn't just bring in one expert. They brought in an absolute academic army. Seriously, they had a parade of them. 8, count them, 8 of the country's top medical and toxicology professors from places like Yale and Cornell all lined up to testify for Claus.
And what these experts had to say was just devastating for the prosecution. They testified that, the needle had insulin on the outside, but not on the inside. Why does that matter? Well, it suggests it was dipped in insulin, not used for an injection, because an injection would have wiped the outside clean. They also dropped a bombshell. Just weeks before her final coma, Sonny had taken a massive dose, 73 aspirin tablets. And their conclusion? Unanimous. The comas were not caused by injected insulin.
So, faced with this absolute mountain of expert testimony creating reasonable doubt, what's a jury supposed to do? In 1985, they came back with a very different verdict. Not guilty. On all charges. Claus Von Bulow was a free man.
But if you think that's the end of the story, oh, you are mistaken. The criminal case might have been over, but the whole saga was far from it. The acquittal did nothing to calm the suspicions of Sonny's children, and the story was about to take another wild turn.
I mean, look how fast this all happens. It is wild. In June, he's acquitted. The very next month, just 1 month later, his stepchildren slap him with a massive civil lawsuit. Then, 2 years after that, instead of this huge court battle, the whole thing is settled out of court. And it's the terms of that settlement that make this case so endlessly debatable.
Okay, so what was in this settlement? For a man who swore up and down he was innocent, the terms are pretty shocking. He agreed to divorce Sonny while she was still in a coma, he gave up any claim to her $14 million fortune, and here are the big ones. He agreed to leave the United States forever and promised to never, ever speak publicly about the case or make any money from it. I mean, you have to ask, why would an innocent man agree to all that?
And that is the question we're left with, isn't it? The criminal court said he's not guilty, but that civil settlement left this cloud of suspicion that never really went away. Was this an innocent man who was just silenced and pushed out of the country? Or was he a guilty man who used his money and power to walk free? The legal case is closed for sure, but the debate, that's far from over.